So, if you've ever been around a newborn, you've probably heard someone mention the Apgar score. It's one of the very first things recorded about a new person. But what does it actually mean? And how did this simple 10-point scale that was invented over 70 years ago become the gold standard all over the world for figuring out, in seconds, if a baby needs help? Well, let's dive in.
I want you to just picture this for a second. You're a doctor in a delivery room, maybe back in the 1940s. A baby is born. Now what? How do you quickly, and I mean quickly, figure out if this tiny person is doing okay or if they need immediate help? That was the huge critical question that, believe it or not, didn't really have a good, solid answer.
You see, before the 1950s, that first minute of life was, well, it was kind of a gray area. It was this moment of, frankly, subjective guesswork. Doctors had their ways of checking, nurses had theirs, but there was no universal language, no single system to communicate a baby's condition clearly and quickly.
And then, in 1953, this paper shows up, and it changes everything. It proposed a totally new way to evaluate newborns that promised to bring some much-needed order to those chaotic first moments. The goal was so simple, but at the same time, totally revolutionary. Let's stop using vague terms like good condition and start using a clear, objective number score.
The author of that paper, Dr. Virginia Apgar, she didn't mince words. She saw this huge gap in care, this reliance on what she called unscientific observations. She just knew that to save more lives, they needed a system, something simple, something repeatable, and something that actually worked.
So who was this doctor who just decided to challenge the way things had always been done? Well, her big idea wasn't dreamed up in some fancy lab. Nope, it came from years and years of hands-on experience right there in the delivery room, where she saw day in and day out how badly they needed some clarity.
Dr. Apgar was an absolute trailblazer. She was a pioneering anesthesiologist, which means she specialized in anesthesia during childbirth. She was fascinated by how it affected not just the mother, but the baby too. And that focus is what led her straight to this problem of figuring out how newborns were really doing.
And this quote, this famous motto of hers, it just captures her passion perfectly. You can hear it, right? For her, this wasn't just some academic exercise. It was a mission. And that fierce determination is what drove her to create a tool that would empower everyone in that room to act, and to act decisively.
All right, so what exactly did she create? What is this score? Let's break it down, because its real genius is in its simplicity. That's precisely why it's worked so well for so long.
Okay, look at this. This is how you turn simple observations into hard data. A nurse or a doctor looks at 5 simple signs. And here's the brilliant part, it's an acronym of her name. A for appearance, or skin color. P for pulse, their heart rate. G for grimace, which is their reflex response. A for activity or muscle tone. And R for respiration, their breathing. Each one gets a score, 0, 1, or 2. You add them up and you get a total score out of 10. So simple, so fast, and so clever.
The timing is also really important. The score at 1 minute is like a quick snapshot of how the baby handled the whole process of being born. But the 5-minute score, that's even more crucial. It shows how well that baby is adapting to life out here in the real world. And if that 5-minute score is a little low, they just keep doing the test to see how the baby is responding to any help they might be getting.
So, let's fast forward to today. How do we interpret these scores in a modern hospital? What do those numbers actually mean for a newborn? Generally, it breaks down like this. A score from 7 to 10 is considered reassuring, a good sign. A score in that middle range, 4 to 6, suggests the baby might need a little bit of help, maybe some extra monitoring. But a score of 3 or below, that's a clear signal that this baby needs immediate medical attention.
Now, here's a super important point, especially for any new parents out there. It is very, very common for perfectly healthy babies to have slightly blue hands and feet right after birth. That gives them a 1 for color instead of a 2. And because of that, a final score of 9 is extremely common and totally normal. Getting a perfect 10 is actually pretty rare, so don't worry about that.
And it's really crucial to know that a low score, especially one that's still under 5 at the 5-minute mark, is not a crystal ball. It does not predict a child's future. While large studies show it can be linked to higher risks for certain issues, for an individual child, it means very little in the long run. The vast majority of children who have low Apgar scores grow up to be perfectly healthy.
And this brings us to a really, really critical point. We have to understand what the Apgar score is not. You know, over the decades, a lot of myths have popped up around this number, so let's clear those up right now.
Let me be as clear as I possibly can be here. The Apgar score does not, will not, and cannot predict how smart your child will be. It doesn't tell you if they're going to be good at sports or what their long-term health is going to look like. Attaching those kinds of meanings to this score is a complete misunderstanding of what it was designed to do.
You know, the score has its limits. It's just a snapshot, right? Not the whole movie. But the most important point on this list might be that third one. If a baby is in distress, life-saving help begins immediately. It starts before the 1-minute score is even done. The score helps assess how the baby is responding to that help. It never, ever delays it.
Dr. Apgar's goal was never about predicting the future. Her whole revolutionary idea was about the now. She wanted to force everyone in that room to do a systematic, focused observation in that critical first minute and give them all a shared language to figure out a newborn's immediate needs.
So, if it's not some crystal ball, then what is the true legacy of this simple 10-point scale? What is its real power 70 years later?
Here it is. The true legacy of the Apgar score is that it fundamentally changed the entire culture of the delivery room. It forced the world to pay close, systematic attention to the newborn in a standardized, scientific way. Dr. Apgar's beautifully simple idea helped build the very foundation of modern neonatology, and it has saved countless lives by making sure that in those first critical moments, no baby is ever, ever overlooked.